Hello, friends. This is Robert Bevan, author of the Caverns and Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're going to be talking about the spell Destructive Wave. Yeah. All right. This is a 5th level spell, is it?
Mm-hmm. 5th level spell.
Paladin only. So 5th level half caster, and it does a little bit of damage and it knocks people prone. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Am I missing anything, or is that it?
Let's I mean, I'm sure it's on screen for the readers at home and the viewers at home. And they would see that it is 5d6 thunder and then 5d6 of your choice. You get to pick radiant or necrotic. So
it does T10d6 total?
10d6 total.
That's something.
Creatures of your choice within 30 feet of you, and then they make a save or fall prone. I want to love this spell. This is like, I think it should be a signpost of this is how paladins play. This is like their whole spell style. They want to be up close and in people's business. They want to be doing things that encourage melee attacks. They care about distance, so this can be like a useful tool if you're trying to protect people behind you and there are people in front of you. You can just selectively choose who gets hit by the destructive wave. Here's the issue. Whenever you would want to cast this spell, it has long since passed. This is a 17th level feature for paladins. You have to be at the top end of play to get access to destructive wave. Apt comparisons to other features gotten at this level. Meteor Swarm is the first one that jumps to mind. That does a little bit more damage, just a little bit. An upcast fireball.
By a little bit, you're speaking sarcastically.
Yeah, it's like 40d6 damage.
All right, yeah.
In 3 areas.
Make that clear.
Great, sorry. 4 times the damage in well over 3 times the area. It just destroys the world, basically. You've got, like, if you were upcasting fireball,
you know what's better than prone? Dead.
Dead is way better than prone. It's in fact the best condition because they're dead. Upcasting fireball does the same amount of damage, which means since 9th level, your full casters have been doing this much damage in an area, which means you have to really care about the prone condition, which is useful, but there are way better spells that people are getting earlier at way higher levels that are also knocking people prone, which leaves us in this spot where I guess you take it as a paladin. I don't think it's that exciting or interesting. If it is always knocked them prone. Oh, it does always knock them prone. Oh, no. I'm sorry. If they pass the con save, they aren't knocked prone. But like, if it always knocked them prone, it'd be like at least a little bit more interesting, but it's only sometimes knocking them prone, and you're probably not going to have the high of a spell save DC because you're a paladin, and you probably put that into your constitution and your strength, so you're not like dying, and you might have some dex because it's useful for dex saves. Charisma definitely isn't the highest attribute you're taking as a paladin, so if you're ever adding like +2 or +3 to this at the top end, which is not unrealistic, like your spell save DC might be sitting at like 13 at this stage of the game. I guess with your proficiency bonus, it'll always be higher than that. It'll always be at least a 14. So 14, 15, 16, somewhere in that range. Things at that tier are not going to have problems making that save, which means you're not reliably getting the prone condition. You're going to be doing more often than not half damage. And it's just, that's it, right? Like, this is not an upper level game changing spell. This isn't some different way you're interacting with the world. This isn't some epic paladin feature to come down and kill all of your enemies. You could double this thing's damage and I'd still be like, okay, now we're starting to be in the territory of a reasonable top end spell for paladins. But like, you get one of these. And 10d6 damage is just, that ain't it.
Do you feel like this would be a worthwhile 5th level spell for full casters?
I think some full casters get a lot of use out of it, yeah. It's one of those interesting spells where it would encourage melee full casters. So you didn't have the Abadur builds, the Bladesinger builds that would be able to, like Warlock builds even would be happy to take something like this. If you were playing the combat style full caster, having AoE damage attached to Martial is good. Like, the words here are correct and powerful for it to be a usable tool for 9th level characters. Having it be a usable tool for 17th level characters, whole different ballgame. It's a victim to the system being what it is. If you're playing a lore bard for some reason in combat, you can steal this spell and make way better use out of it than your paladin ever will. Also, imagine being the paladin in the group that watches your bard at 9th level take your capstone feature at that level and just start clearing people out with it. That's got to feel like utter garbage. The prone condition is useful. Like I shouldn't understate that, but the prone condition also, like, it'll give you advantage on melee attack rolls against things that are prone. They can also,
but again, the prone condition is useful in what you're saying, if I understand correctly, and then it makes things easier to kill.
Yeah.
But the dead condition is much more useful.
Yeah. I mean, this will be probably more damage than 2 attacks, but 2 attacks with 2 smites, we're like, oh, how much better is this than 2 attacks and 2 smites? And that's not necessarily better. Especially if we're looking at like crit fishing builds with paladins where you're trying to critically hit to get more divine smite damage. So like the munchkin things you do with paladin typically involve getting more crits because it doubles your divine smite. And this doesn't interact with that at all. This is the kind of thing where if you need to use destructive wave at the upper tiers, it's probably because you don't have a full caster in the party. And in that instance, it's probably about as good as you get. And you're pretty happy to be like, all right, I can't do more than this amount of damage to the 12 things within range. Right.
So a paladin at 17th level doesn't have any other better options?
Not really. No. They're making a bunch of attack rolls. Like that's the foundational problem between the martial and the or the full caster characters, right? The full casters have things like Meteor Swarm. They have things like giant area of effect, mass amounts of damage spells that would take 8 to 10 rounds for your non-martial characters to begin to catch up damage-wise. This is with the caveat, so long as there are enough creatures in range. If you're talking about single target creatures, often the martial character is going to be keeping up closer. But even then, full casters will have better things like Disintegrate to do just a buttload of damage front loaded. I'm of the opinion, frankly, the game kind of falls apart once you get past 9th level. Once you start to get to the upper tiers of play, the balance just gets thrown out the window and full casters just take over. Like there's nothing they can't do there's nothing that non-full caster characters can do that can reasonably compete with what full caster characters can do whenever we're talking about breaking the game in half. When we're talking about, like, even if we're getting into the munchkiniest of builds, if you get to level 17, being a full caster wizard is pretty absurd because you have 9th level spells that break the game in half. And even if you're doing the crit fishing assassin paladin builds where you're doing hundreds of damage to a single target, you load all of your resources into a single explosion that kills something for 500 damage. And then the wizard goes, okay, great, hold my beer. I'm going to use a single spell slot to do that much damage to everything around us, meaning making it so I leveled that army where you leveled the big bad. Yeah. And like that doesn't look or feel great, right? This is definitely a 5th level spell in power level. This definitely is a spell that is, I would even argue, is slightly above where I would want a 5th level spell slot power wise to be. It's fireball with upside, which is that's what upcasting spells should feel like. The problem is when you don't get it at 9th level, when the other people are getting it, it becomes substantially more shit. It becomes substantially less useful. And that's where it lands.
All right. Yeah. Got anything else to say?
That's a 2 out of 5. This is a spell that you'll begrudgingly, I mean, you couldn't get excited about it. I imagine some people do think the giant wave of destruction, knock 4 things prone, advantage on attack rolls if it gets to my next turn and they don't just get up because they can just. Quick caveat, like you knocking them prone means you're not getting advantage of those attack rolls because you use your action to do this, which means they're going to use their movement to get back up, which means they're not going to be prone anymore, which means there's no real benefit to you. So you have to have other people care about the prone condition, which feels pretty bad. But if you're in that instance, then yeah, cool. I gave the monks some more attack rolls. I gave the fighters some more attack rolls. The barbarian hit things a little bit easier, but the barbarian was already have advantage on these attack rolls because it's a barbarian with reckless attack. Like, yeah, the more you think about it, the more you dive into like what the spell actually does, and you're like, okay, this is just a close to you fireball for a capstone feature, and that's garbage. 2 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm not going to play devil's advocate on this one. I'm going to just straight up agree with you. 2 out of 5 sounds about right. All right, everyone, that was Destructive Wave. Thank you, Sam, for joining us, and thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it. A gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description where you'll find my Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.